Okay, good morning, everybody. Surprisingly enough, there's still some people in the business who know something about print, and I'm probably one of the remaining few at Adobe who does. No photographs. Bye-bye. No photographs here. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to discuss this morning some of the standards for print in PDF. And actually, we're going to go a bit beyond just print, because today publishing is more than just print. But we're going to talk about the new subset standards in PDF associated with publishing, including PDFIX and things related to variable data publishing. Okay, basically we'll start off with some background, how we got where we are today. We'll talk a bit about PDF itself and the PDFIX standards. We'll then move into a quick discussion of PDFVT for variable data processing, variable data printing, and variable data publishing. VDP is not a social disease. Then we'll summarize and discuss some of the challenges, and if we have some time left, questions and answers. And since I'm from Adobe, people usually have a lot of questions, whether they're related to the topic or not. I'm going to be here through the end of the day, so I'm fair game of the things that you need to or want to discuss privately. Okay, well, let's go back to the very beginning, so to speak, of electronic publishing. Basically, we're talking about anything related to publishing that related to doing things other than hot metal, linotype machines, etc., that were long ago. Prior to 1984, anything that fit into the category of electronic publishing was totally proprietary. You had proprietary workflows, proprietary file formats, proprietary fonts. Everything was pretty much batch-oriented, paper tape. What you see is what you get just simply didn't exist. Even where you had something like that, there was a transformation from one to another. For example, you were able to do typesetting with Wang word processing, but you had to put in commands in the middle of the word processing documents. It wasn't particularly friendly. But one thing that was very clear about that, those good old days, so to speak, that weren't really good whatsoever, was that you had a situation of vendor lock-in. Once you went with a particular system, that was it. You were tied into that, you were tied into their products, and you couldn't move back and forth. And the vendors loved it to some degree or another. Okay. 1984, things changed a bit when Adobe came out with PostScript. Okay, and what was very important about this was it was device and vendor independent language, and it was capable of expressing text, vector, and raster content. But surprisingly enough, it wasn't just a layout, it wasn't just a page description language, it's actually a programming language. Matter of fact, it's more a programming language than it is a page description language. It's a programming language with a bunch of operators that just so happen to mark pages with graphical content. One of the things that's somewhat problematic, though, is it's a non-deterministic type of situation. In other words, depending upon the fact that you can do programming, and it means that you don't necessarily know what your output's going to be. It can vary. You can query external factors. You know, how many sunspots are there, what day of the week is it, even random number generators, and actually change your output on that basis. There's no direct page access. For example, you can't say, well, I need to print page 543 out of 5,000 and just simply go to that page within a PostScript file, because everything depends upon what happened prior to that. And then certainly it's one of the most difficult things to debug and edit, especially if you had somebody producing a PostScript stream that was particularly sophisticated with subroutine calls and processes and interesting abbreviations, etc., or even encoded in certain ways. So it's much more difficult than even trying to debug an HTML web page. Okay, in practice, even though we claimed it to be device independent, you were effectively doing device dependencies because the actual device controls were in line with the rest of the PostScript. There was something called a set page device command, and that in itself yielded somewhat device-dependent PostScript. plus people's particular ways of producing PostScript led to that as well. Okay, well, what came next? Well, there was PDF. And PDF was basically the brainchild of John Warnock, the founder of Adobe, who basically looked at PostScript and said, yeah, this is nice, but, okay, that there was a weakness there that PostScript had this fact that wasn't deterministic. You really couldn't reliably communicate between systems, and he was looking for some way of communicating between one system and another, at least in terms of final form output. At the time, Adobe had some of its employees who were on Macs, some on Windows, many on Unix. And going from system to system, the only thing that was in common was an ASCII text file, and even that had problems because each of those three platforms had different line endings for ASCII text files. There was a very famous paper he wrote internally known as the Camelot paper, and that was the basis for the PDF project, which yielded PDF and Acrobat in 1993. If you want to really take a look at what PDF is, it's the graphical essence of PostScript. Now, people wonder, where did you get a product name like Distiller? It sounds like something that's coming out of a company making scotch and other refined spirits. Well, in fact, that's really what happened. The idea was that we took PostScript, got rid of the programmatic aspects of it, we ended up with the essence of PostScript, and that's why we distilled it in PostScript into PDF. That's where that particular thing came from. So if this ever becomes a question on Jeopardy, you now know the answer. Okay, so the fact is that what PDF did was it tamed PostScript. PostScript was great, wonderful, fun, but it had issues, and effectively PDF provided the solutions for that. We'll contrast those a little bit in a few minutes. In terms of what happened over the years, going from the beginning through, let's say, the last version that had any particular differences in the imaging model, we started off with version 1.0, of course, which was really great for display, but not particularly good for printing. As we went through further releases, we added capabilities that made sense for printing itself. CMYK was really not a feature of initial PDF. It was not designed for printing. It was primarily screen. As you went to PDF 1.2, Acrobat 3, you started getting enough in there such that printers were taking this seriously. Separation, color spaces, patterns, double byte font support, and certain pre-press features. Acrobat 4 was the first version where effectively PDF became an equal to PostScript, where every feature that was in PostScript language level 3, including smooth shaded gradients, ended up in PDF also. But at this point, we actually exceeded PostScript, and that is because we added support for ICC color management. PostScript never had ICC color management. It had CIE-based color management, but that wasn't supported by any applications. So the fact was, at this particular point, we had the basis of modern printing from PDF. We went beyond that. PDF 1.4 added transparency into the imaging model, something that PostScript never had, never will get. And then as you went farther down, we ended up with support for JPEG 2000 images, compression on that, support for content stream compression such that you didn't have to put a PDF file through a zip compressor in order to get it right. We actually zip compressed the object streams themselves within the file. Went to PDF 1.6, we supported device N for N-channel color spaces, full embedding of open-type fonts, and additional additional optional content group options for supporting layers. By the time we got to PDF 1.7 for Acrobat 8, at that particular point, we donated the PDF standard to ISO, and it was no longer an Adobe standard. It was, in fact, an international standard supported by, not supported, but being continued development being done via ISO. So anyone who said, well, this is something from Adobe, it used to be that the changes in the spec were done in Bob Wolf's office in the corner of one of the buildings with him and 3 other people deciding what wanted to be done, and that was it. Now it's done with these large committees that take many years, for better or for worse. Okay, well, if you wanted to compare PostScript versus PDF, I'll leave this as reference material for you for the most part. These slides will be made available, right? You shake your head, yes, good. I spent time on it. I'm glad to know they'll get good use. But one's an interpretive programming language. The other is a declarative page description language. One's non-deterministic. PDF is very deterministic. What you see and what's there is what's going to render. PostScript is streamed. PDF is page independent. You can immediately go to page 534 if you want. You don't have to go through everything that precedes it. ICC column management is in today's PDF. All job control is external to PDF. You can't put in things such as grab from the third tray for a particular page in PDF. That's done through external job control that would reference a page. It's amenable to edits and fix-ups. A number of the products that you've seen here, as well as Acrobat, provide support for editing, touching up PDF files, as well as other things. Easy to preview. Ever preview a PostScript file? How do you preview a PostScript file? Convert it to PDF, right? Right, okay. And certainly we have live image transparency in PDF. We don't have that in PostScript at all. Also, it turns out that PDF is amenable to variable data publishing. We'll discuss that in a few minutes. It's also the basis for international standards, including subset standards, many of which are related to printing, some of which have already been discussed here, such as PDFA and PDFUA, as well as PDFE and a few other things as well. Okay, well, what is PDFIX? Well, the PDFIX came on the scene in 1999. It was basically trying to meet the needs of the graphic arts industry, which was scared shitless about PDF. They took a look at this spec that was this thick. It was like the Manhattan phone directory. And they were concerned, well, is there some subset of this that we can safely use for the print industry, that we can make sure that it's properly produced? Okay, and basically it limits which PDF features may be used. It requires certain PDF features be used and how they must be specified. And it did something rather unique. It was the first time you had a standard that required that all the fonts be embedded. Dealing with fonts is probably one of the most difficult things when it comes to printers. I know some printers in this room. You'll shake your heads. Font is a 4-letter word beginning with F. Okay? It causes quite a few issues. But this was the first time we said, even if it was Helvetica, Times, Courier, any of those base fonts that were supposedly always available, if you wanted to have a PDFX file, you'd better embed that in the PDF file because that is the font that's going to be printed with. Okay? Don't rely on something that might be on the RIP or the printer somehow. So this was unique. This was something new at the time. It also specified how in the PDF file you would identify that it was a PDFX file. So just the same way that basically printing was PostScript was tamed by PDF, PDFX tames PDF itself. It basically produced a comfortable, safe subset that the print service providers were able to feel okay with. Okay, and it worked pretty well. Well, PDFX as a standard evolved starting in 1999. If you take a look at the condition of the world of 1999, everything was done as opaque content. If you wanted something that looked transparent, you started playing around with things such as overprint and other sorts of hackery to make believe that you had transparency. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Color management was in infancy. Basically, most printers treated, colors, well, all colors were CMYK as it came down from Mount Sinai on those tablets. They were all CMYK tablets. And most printing at the time was being done by offset presses using film or to plate or emerging CTP technologies. Digital was something that was it'll come in a few years. People didn't particularly look at that as something that was mainstream. At the present, transparency is ubiquitous. Ubiquitous, it's there everywhere. All you need is one drop shadow on a page and you have transparency. All you need is some sort of feathering of an image and you have transparency effects. All you need is a clipped image where the background is clear, and that's transparency. We have the issues of people trying to repurpose content, and PDF in particular. This is a requirement. It's not necessarily for one particular condition. Digital printing is coming to be at least as important as traditional offset and flexo printing and gravure. Okay, and that has some particular requirements, one of which is actually more device independence than you typically would have for offset. And color management is something that can no longer be ignored. Okay, I do not know of a single camera that produces CMYK. Okay, and it's fairly ridiculous to expect that a professional photographer is going to convert their content to CMYK. Which CMYK? And this is rather interesting. You'll see various printers would say, well, everything must be submitted to CMYK, but not tell the designers, the photographers, which CMYK conditions to use. So the world of PDF required the capability, at least PDF subset standards required the ability to leave things in their original color spaces and leave this conversion to the end. And the fact is that all reasonably recent vintage PDF RIPs and digital front ends directly do support ICC color management and transparency in PDF files. Okay, well, what are the versions? I'm not going to try getting in depth here, but it originally started as a standard that was supported by the American National Standards Institute, the original PDFIX1 from 1999. By 2001, we transitioned this over to ISO, and we have PDFIX1A 2001, which is still probably the most popular of the PDFX versions. People feel comfortable with it. But the issue is that it's based upon PDF 1.3, which has dead transparency, no color management. It has basically CMYK and spot colors only. And typically that means that you're going to be fairly device dependent. Why? Because if you have to flatten transparency or change everything to CMYK, you have to know the exact color space of your output, and you have to know the actual resolution of the output device. How many publishing professionals know what their stuff's going to be printed on, or any of these characteristics? None, really. You're lucky if they know what a press is. But ironically, it's still the most widely accepted PDF standard to date. There was a PDFX2 that was never published. PDFX3 basically extended PDFX1A to support color management, but still it did not have support for transparency. There was an update to PDFX1A and PDFX3 in 2003 to be based on PDF 1.4 but not supporting transparency. To me, that's also called PDF 1.3. It's never been really supported by anyone, although RIPS and a number of Adobe products will produce it. There was also there was a PDFX2 that was published that was effectively providing support for an OPI-like workflow for PDF for printing. We withdrew that particular standard a few years ago for one very good reason. Nobody consumed it, nobody produced it. What if you could produce a standard, nobody comes? That's exactly what happened there. So that's gone. Well, in 2008, we published a standard PDFX4 and sort of a subsidiary of that, PDFX4P. And this was basically designed to support modern PDF print workflows. It was slightly updated in 2010 to fix some, let's say, anomalies in the specification, and it therefore replaced the 2008 version. But basically, this allows blind exchange of CMYK, RGB, gray, and color managed and spot color content. Okay, so it's fully color managed, Supports ICC color management, supports live transparency, layers, JPEG-2 and JPEG-2 image compression, and compressed object streams. The type of things that you get with modern PDF export from InDesign, Illustrator, even Quark Express is supposedly doing that these days, etc. There were basically two conformance levels. PDFX4 itself basically embedded the output intent. PDFX4P had a pointer to someplace where you could get that. So that if you didn't want half a megabyte of swap or FOGRA profiles in every one of your files, you could point to that in PDFX4P. Okay, effectively, this is the most, we regard this as the most reliable of the PDFX variants for blind exchange of graphically rich content. Okay, the fact that we have integrated transparency, blending, and color management when the content is rendered is very important, because that means that you could produce content, produce a PDFX file without necessarily knowing what type of press it's going to be on, whether, you know, what the resolution is, what the actual color space, the exact color space will be. The fact is, you can repurpose the content is important. It's the most compact PDF representation because we have compressed object streams, because we have content that is not flattened. When you flatten transparency, you end up with much more bloated files. This is, yields PDF files that are much smaller in size. And it's very widely supported by modern era PDF producers and renderers, both for the RIPs and displays. So this should be, famous last words, a no-brainer. We do have something called PDFX5, and this extends PDFX4 with 3 additional levels of compliance, one of which is G for OPI-like functionality, so you could reference external pieces of PDF and bring them in. PG is not parental guidance, it's basically external profile and external graphics. It's basically a combination of PDFX5G and PDFX4P. PDFX5N allows for external reference to an N-colorant output intent ICC profile. In other words, for packaging where you might want to have C, M, Y, K, O, G, M, O, U, S, E, etc., all these colorants, you know, where you have these 10 tower presses and you're doing rather sophisticated things, this would allow for that. It has to be external because the base PDF specification, ISO specification, doesn't support N-color colorants. But if it's external, that's okay. Okay, the issue though with the PDFX5 is, other than X5N, is that even though most of the viewers and the RIPs support it, we don't know of anybody yet who supports PDFX5G or PG content generation, and that has its ramifications going forward. Again, it takes us a while to learn this, but what if you have a standard and nobody comes to the party? That's a problem. Okay, for your entertainment notification, for future reference, this is probably the best I could do in terms of contrasting, going all the way back to PostScript through the PDFX4 and X5 versions, what the differences are. As you go from the left to the right, you become more device independent, it's more blind exchange, and it's more amenable to today's workflows. The only exception, of course, is PDFX5, where you have external content. That sort of gives it an amber signal there. Okay, well, where are we going after that? Well, the responsibility for developing PDFX standards rests with ISO's Technical Committee 130, Working Group 2, Task Force 2, of which I'm the chair. We're currently working on a PDFX6 specification. It will be based upon PDF 2.0, ISO standard 32000-2, and not Adobe PDF anymore, but the ISO PDF, and a standard which is still under development. Additional capabilities is the support for page-level output intent, such that in an individual PDF file, you could have, let's say, page 1, which is a cover page, and that's printed with different print conditions than let's say, the body of a document. which means you should have a different profile, or might need to have a different profile. So that's going to be supported there. Black point compensation, although most of us think of that as, well, that's part of the PDF world. Yes and no. Adobe products support it, many color management systems support it, but surprisingly enough, there's not a word about it in the current PDF specification. ISO 32000-2 and PDFIX, which will be based upon that, will actually allow you to turn it on and off globally and on particular objects. Most of us would wonder why someone would want to turn it off, but nonetheless, it will be an option. We also support something called document parts, and this is something that is typically used for variable data publishing, for specifying what pages should be on what type of media, sort of a connection into an external job control. That capability, which you had in PDF VT, we're going to move to be supported not only in PDFIX, but also part of the ISO 32000 specification itself. We're going to be removing many of the restrictions against annotations. What's annotations? Well, for example, in PDF, you can embed a movie. You can embed sounds. You can embed any number of different things. Forms are annotations. Why don't we allow, what's the problem there? Do you know any RIP that's going to play a movie? Or well, they might make sounds, but not purposely. The idea is that if you have a proxy for the movie, for example, a JPEG image of, Clark Cable and whoever, in the movie, we'll print that. We're not going to print the movie. But there's no reason to restrict that. Same is true with forms. If you fill out a form, why not be able to have that as a PDFIX file? So we've removed a number of restrictions like that, as well as some of the capabilities in terms of issues such as actions, so that you can have buttons, previous, next page, that are non-printable, but no reason why we can't have those in a PDFIX file. We know how RIPs work these days. They're much more reliable. The 3 conformance levels we're going to have, PDFIX6 will be roughly equivalent to an upgrade to PDFIX4. PDFIX6P will be an upgrade to PDFIX4P, and PDFIX6N will be an upgrade to PDFIX5N. We currently have no plans to do any updates to PDFIX5G and X5PG for the reasons mentioned before. It's very likely that we will have this sometime in early 2017 to coincide with the availability of the ISO standard on which it's based. We expect certain applications, at least some that I have some influence over, to be available in a similar time frame. The other thing that we're currently discussing, and this is rather important, is the ability to have a file, a PDFIX file, serve both for screen and print. Now, what am I talking about here? Well, one of the biggest problems you typically have is if you're a publisher, you produce a PDFIX file and you send it to print. Then what if you want to have it on your website for download? What do people typically do? Well, they'll take that X1, if they take the X1A file, it's pretty bulky, or even an X4 file, it's pretty bulky, and they say, well, maybe I should down-res the images. Well, should I down-res images anymore? Well, if I have an iPad or a similar tablet, Android tablet, what's the resolution of those screens? You all shout out, that's close to 300 dpi. Well, isn't that sort of what we typically do for images for print? So the idea of downsampling images to 72 dpi for screens is old news. So that's not an issue anymore. But one of the problems is that if you have a PDF file in which the content has a blending space of CMYK, and you're showing it on a screen, and that's a really vibrant image, there's a little bit of a problem there, and that is that on the screen it looks dull and lifeless. So we're working on protocols that would allow one to have a PDFIX file that prints with the proper gamut, but has a display mode that really pops out of one PDF file. We're working on the details on that. There's no guarantee we'll have that in PDFIX6, but it's a recognition of the fact that it's not just print these days. We're in a multimedia environment, and this is rather important, not only to people who create content, but also to people who are in the print service provider industry because they're really in the communications business, not just printing. Okay, well, what about PDF VT? Okay, VDP is a particular application. I'm not going to get into too many details about this, but when you get all this wonderful stuff in the mail, communications, and have your name written on the beach, or your name in prominent letters somehow, or even to the point of your phone bill that's customized, but has particular advertising appropriate to what they think your needs are, that's variable data publishing. All the way from transactional to things which are really pure marketing pieces. And despite the fact that if here, let's say in Europe, you get something like this, we get this in the United States, every time I get a bill, they're telling, oh, 10 minutes, okay, thank you. Every time I get a bill, they're telling me, you really want to get rid of paper, click here. Do you think they stopped sending me paper? They stopped sending me the bill, but they send me these beautiful things with my name on it, telling me how many additional TV channels I should subscribe to, you know, how I could make my house more efficient if I only do whatever, with all sorts of personal information on it. So, yeah, the bills are going away. Well, the bills aren't going away. They'll have a PDF file someplace that I can download, but they're going to send me more personalized marketing. And VDP is what that is. VDP is not a social disease. Typically, you're dealing with business rules that merge against templates. They use some sort of authoring tool, and out comes something which goes to a printer. Sometimes as well to mobile devices, but the process of doing this printing is what the issue is here. And doing it effectively because much of this printing is being done on devices that go up to 200 to 300 letter or A4 size pages per minute or faster, okay, on roll-fed devices, full color. So what is PDF VT? It's a family of standards to optimize use of PDF for variable data and transactional print material. It basically uses something that was in PDF from long ago called X objects. It's not X-rated material, but they're basically an ability to take a group of objects, put them together, whether it's images, text, vector, and images, etc., and sometimes, or even external objects, and group them together and say, okay, I'm going to invoke this object once, maybe invoke it again, maybe rotate it a little bit, little changes, whatever. But that allows you to do something very important. It means a content that repeats, you can define once and call multiple times. And you start thinking, hey, you know, if I have an intelligent rip, I can cache some of this stuff, and I can make that rip go like a hot knife through butter. And that's exactly what the idea of PDF VT is. The DNA of PDF VT is effectively that we use these X objects for material that is constant or reused. As a matter of fact, it would be variable material that's reused, and that we have certain metadata for production purposes. Okay, and that we don't put the job ticket, we have an external job ticket, it could be JDF, it could be something else, that effectively interfaces to a PDF VT through something called DPM metadata. So you can effectively say there's metadata within a PDF VT file that basically delineates each group. You know, this is the group for Anthony A. Aardvark, this is for Zeke Zinsmeister. This metadata can allow you to associate certain groups of pages or documents for everyone in a particular country, everyone in a particular zip code, etc. So for reduction purposes, you can do that. Or which pages are covers, which are the internal, which is the envelope, etc. And there's a full production capability built into this. And it really didn't require much in the way of changing PDF. It was a matter of setting up the protocols for that. Okay, well, what are the problems with the non-PDF VDP solutions? Well, the type of problems we had before we had PDF for non-PDF, for non-VDP types of things. Searching, archiving, how do you preview it, lack of what I call a unified workflow, etc. And it's very vendor specific, and I'll give you some examples in a minute. How do you search something that's not PDF? If it's PostScript based, how do you preview it, convert it to PDF. Well, okay, that answers it. But what if you don't have PDF VT and you just have an unconstrained PDF? There were issues. If you don't use these X objects, for example, you have performance issues. You get gigantic files because you keep on repeating the same content. With those large files, you would have problems in terms of print performance because you don't have the caching. So it's not the file format itself, it was a matter of setting up the protocols and having RIPs, DFEs, that actually would do something with those particular protocols. Okay, just as I had for PDFIX, these are the solutions we have for VDP, going all the way over to PostScript-based solutions, which are very vendor-dependent, tie you into a particular thing. PPML is a XML-based VDP solution. This typically is something where vendors do their own thing. Every vendor's PPML is incompatible with everyone else's, doesn't really support live transparency, etc. And usually requires that there's PostScript underneath as well because it supports EPS. Proprietary, there are all sorts of special things either based on PostScript or proprietary things. Again, this vendor lock-in. What if you just take PDFX 4x5? That's nice, but it doesn't have those protocols we mentioned. Go to PDF VT, and we think we have the full solution there for you. And we've been seeing RIPs and DFEs going at 200, 300 DPI with very graphically rich, with transparency, with color management pieces. Okay, just to tie it into the PDF Association, they've been very gracious to host a series of test files on the website, free for anyone to download. If you want to see what a PDF VT file actually looks like, I had some slave labor from Cal Poly and San Luis Obispo, some students of mine actually produced some of these files. Not slave labor, they're wonderful students. They just didn't know it was difficult. That's how you get work done. You get some students, they don't know it's hard and they don't complain, and they got them credit. And we learned an awful lot. But here's where you can get some test files to see exactly what this is about. And when you have things such as 500,000 pages taking less than half a gigabyte, that's pretty good. Okay, so you tend to think of these large campaigns, it's not that bad in terms of PDF file size. We actually are doing pretty well with that. Okay, summarizing some of the challenges. How am I doing on time? We'll get there. Okay, PDFX 4 standard provides a basis for publishing workflows that are highly reliable, device independent, process independent, yields highest quality, and supports unified workflows. I've mentioned this a few times. What's a unified workflow? It means effectively that you don't have to do different things for digital versus offset versus flexo. To the point where you're ready to go to the press, it's all the same thing. Okay? It's PDF and it's device independent. The PDF VT1 standard builds upon the PDFX4 standard. In the same way, it has all the benefits of PDFX4. Supports fully common unified workflows. You're not using a different language to do VDP jobs. It's just PDF. Okay, and again, this is very important, it avoids vendor lock-in. Now, I don't think anyone's here from Kodak or Xerox or EFI. That's good. But you really don't want to, if you're a printer, you don't want to be locked into somebody's DFE, RIP, printer, whatever. You want to be able to do what's appropriate and choose the device at the very end. Or even if you're overflowing, your shop's overflowing, if you have to send it outside, PDF allows you to do that. Proprietary methods don't. Okay? What are the challenges? The challenges are vendor product differentiation. That's a nice marketing term. That means incompatibilities. Everyone has their own secret sauce they put into products. Typically when I deal with vendors who have all sorts of knobs and dials and stuff, very often I tell people who I have to work with, just turn all that crap off and it'll probably work best. Okay. Secondly, there are products, both for creation and consumption, that claim compliance with PDFX and PDFVT that don't really do that. And unfortunately, there's nothing in ISO standards that allows us to have a compliance type of thing. In other words, we can't sue somebody who says it's PDFX compliant and it really isn't. Print service providers, there are some of those who act like modern day Luddites in terms of shunning customer service. and they'd rather blame the customer, and that's a problem. On the other side, we have designers who could use some education as well. Continuing education is rather important. It's one thing to learn something when you're in school, but the industry changes. I've been at Adobe 25 years as of a month ago, and I've seen more changes than you can imagine. And the reason I've been there for 25 years is because I change with things. I learn and I try to proselytize what we've learned to the benefit of the industry. But the customers and the print service providers and the vendors all have to do the same type of thing. There are people who use dumbed-down versions of these standards. In other words, oh, well, it's PDFX4, but I'll make everything CMYK. Or I have PDFVT, but I'm not going to do X objects. Well, that doesn't buy anything. Yes, these things technically obey the standard, but not the spirit of it. And then overly complex workflows. Okay, I hopefully will not offend anybody here, but there are vendors who will sell you all sorts of pieces of software to interfere with a workflow. Where, you know, somebody produces a perfectly fine PDFX4 file from InDesign, and there's a perfectly good rip over here, whether it has an Adobe PDF print engine rip or a global graphics-based rip. Their stuff works quite fine with these standards too. Martin Bailey and I are good friends professionally. But the fact is that every time you put something in the middle, they'll screw around with those files. Oh, we're going to check this, we're going to play with that, we're going to adjust this, that, and something else. Those variables often cause more problems than they're really worth. And the thing that is even more interesting, and this happens more times than you can imagine, I follow Adobe's internal customer forums every so often, like probably once or twice a week. This looked good in design. I was able to print to a PostScript printer from Acrobat, and it worked fine. My printer can't get it to print right, and this doesn't work, or that doesn't work, or they get white boxes around things. Now we've asked the question, what does your printer do with that file when he receives it, or she receives it? Ask them whether they're opening it in Illustrator and mucking around with it. 4 out of 5 times that's what happens. They save it, and of course they've ruined the transparency, they've ruined the color management. Since the fonts aren't installed in their system, the fonts is either converted into outlines or they are rasterized, etc. All sorts of problems occur. Illustrator is not a PDF editor. But again, the fewer steps in your workflow, the more likely you're going to have fewer problems. So this is something that is an issue as well. Okay. Questions?
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
As I said, I'll be around here if anyone wants to challenge any of this, has questions, observations, compliments, eggs you want to throw at me, etc. I'll be glad to entertain that. If there's anything now? Okay, thank you very much.
All right.